Familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás. Entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, como hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro, vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia,
sí,
para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
el objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy, como que el ambiente era muy familiar. Entonces yo me sentí muy cómoda.
Felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it. Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been just, she's a part of the family.
Alrighty, we will call this meeting to order at 10:04 a.m. I'd like to invite the clerk to conduct our roll call.
Member Gasca?
Here.
Member McNerlin is absent, and Director Navarez is absent. Director Bailey?
Present.
Vice Chair Crane?
Present.
Chair Klein?
Present. All right, I would like to invite Director Crane to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve our agenda today.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, clerk, do we need a vote?
Director Gasca?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. All right, we will now move to public comment. The Groundwater Sustainability Agency welcomes input From the audience, if there is a matter of business on the agenda that you are interested in, you may address the board when this matter is considered. If you wish to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Clerk, is there any public comment?
None online and none in the chamber.
Right. Seeing no public comment, we will move to item 4. Discussion and possible action on 4A, consideration of the fiscal year 25-26 operating budget in the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And we will turn it over to staff for presentation.
Thank you, and good morning. In the spirit of budget season, we're bringing forward a proposed FY 25-26 operating budget for the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Staff recommends board approval of the proposed budget. Essentially, this budget funds essential activities for the agency to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, commonly known as SGMA. The proposed budget totals $1.32 million in revenue. This is a 48% increase from the prior year, primarily driven by grant funds. Expenditures are projected at $1.14 million, reflecting a 60% increase. This is primarily due to the launch of an upcoming technical study of the interconnected surface water and groundwater dependent ecosystems. For background, GSA staff met twice with the ad hoc budget committee, which included directors Gaska and Watt, to develop the proposed budget. And at this time, I'll do a brief presentation, but I want to provide an opportunity for directors Gaska and Bailey to just share insights as to that budget process. If you'd like to share anything about the process itself or some of the...
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's still a little high, I guess, but I feel pretty good on the progress that we've made and keeping the costs as affordable as we can. I think when we first started this process, like before the city of Ukiah took over, there was kind of the approach of throwing as Indigo said, throwing the kitchen sink at it, throwing what they thought that the state wanted to hear instead of just really focusing on what we really needed to do, what was required, and kind of doing, the bare minimum. And so, I mean, part of it is that we all have different interests. The county has a certain interest, and the city does, and municipal water purveyors and agricultural interests, and we have different ways on how we fund those interests. And so I think trying to take advantage of SGMA and the GSA to help position us to be more successful getting grants for projects, but also trying to control the cost. I think now the the process is a lot more streamlined than it was as we've narrowed down the scope and what is really required.
I'm the alternate, and it was Chris Watt who was on the ad hoc, so I don't really have any insight into the process of developing the budget. But I do notice that there's no actual spends in this request, so it would be really helpful. It was requested at the last meeting and recorded in the draft minutes that you would provide the spend that you've actually done this year so that we could kind of see the progress on that. I was curious if you had any of those numbers, because that would help inform whether the budget as adopted was followed and then how that might project forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. We do have actuals that we'll be presenting today. They're current, and also the ad hoc group was privy to the actuals at the time, so that was part of the discussion and the formulation process. But in addition, I just want to echo something that Director Watt had shared about the importance of, from a social perspective, trying to demonstrate to the public what these funds are being utilized for and trying to tie those directly to the project and management actions outlined in the GSP. And so you'll see in our presentation this morning that we are trying to integrate where expenditures are going and what that value is that we're getting in response. And so specifically those are, the periodic evaluation model updates, the rate and fee study, the GSP periodic evaluation, the well inventory study, and the interconnected surface water groundwater study. So these are all PMAs outlined in section 5112 of the GSP, and so that was a request of Director Watt, and we've tried to integrate that as much as we can. Okay, so we'll just begin this presentation. It will try to be thorough and brief. So here you have income, and as you'll see, I'll just kind of point out a few things rather than go through line by line, but try to highlight the important aspects here. So I think starting off with our fiscal year end reserves, you'll see that the actuals to date were actually slightly below, and we're on track to kind of meet what the adopted budget for the year set out. But you'll note that we do aim to end next fiscal year with a larger reserve. And this is, I think, pretty critical to ensure that in the event that something occurs that we need it, that we have a little bit more of a robust reserve. So I think at the current moment, we're in a good position, but ideally we would end up next year with more reserves than we currently have. So we're all good there. You'll notice changes from different grant activities, mostly from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which I'll provide an update on in a little bit. In terms of GSA fee revenue, we've actually exceeded our expected revenue for the year. And we expect that to increase going into next year as a direct result of increasing fees. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Probably the biggest change in our budget situation. Again, here you have expenses. So these are the, sort of the administration and the PMA administration, as I talked about, directly implementing the GSP. Again, we're under budget in all of those to date. I will note that we do have some outstanding invoices, and there'll be some more charges, but from a fiscal standpoint, we're ending the year on a pretty good note. Again, in terms of GSP implementation, again, we've tried to create these line items to be specific to the actual work that's outlined in the GSP, so you can see those there at the bottom of the table. And again, the actuals are below in all cases, so we've tried to incorporate a lot of cost efficiency, and some of it has to do with some actions that will take place next fiscal year that we're perhaps a little bit behind.
I believe Director Crane has a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, sir.
I appreciate the information on within budget. There's a companion piece I think we should be made aware of on a continuing basis, and that is, of the things that we've undertaken, is the percentage of completion corresponding or not corresponding with the expense so far? Because just because we haven't spent it doesn't mean we might not be in trouble from a budget point of view because we haven't achieved anywhere near as much as we should have at that point. And likewise, if it's the reverse, it's good to know that as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's something we can definitely incorporate moving forward. And again, we have West Yost on the call as well. I think it's important just to reflect that the city of Ukiah has been in management for about 3 months now, 3-4 months. And so, we've been in a transition, and, as general manager, I've been trying to very quickly, but also in a cost-effective way, get up to speed and get briefed on how things are going. And I think we're making really good progress there. I certainly don't have the full understanding at this point. Again, we're 3-4 months in. But we do have West Yost on the line who can share more if there are more hard-hitting questions about, progress made throughout the entire fiscal year. And in summary, these are sort of our total income and expenses for the year. And with that, we recommend that the board approve the proposed budget, but would like to provide the board with an opportunity for more questions for staff and then also to invite public comment.
Can the general manager return back to the previous slide? I'm going to ask a quick question. So I'm seeing that the total expenses are obviously coming in quite low. Can you talk about a little bit about that?
I think, yeah, I might invite Harry Starkey from West Yost to speak more, but I think we do, as I mentioned, we do have some outstanding invoices and there's still 3 weeks left in the fiscal year. The only thing I'll add, and I'll let Harry speak in more detail, is in the last 4 months, we've really tried to minimize costs. I won't take credit for all of that, but I think that we are really trying to minimize the number of meetings, I'm trying to streamline and find some cost effectiveness. So just my 10 cents, but Harry, if you'd like to kind of share and respond.
Harry, we cannot hear you. There we go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I do know that the West Yost budget, because of the transition to the city of Ukiah, the GSA is realizing savings because they have been doing work that we would ordinarily do. And in round numbers, that was about $30,000 that we think is going to fall to the bottom line at the end of the fiscal year. That's a portion of it. Blake is correct. There are outstanding invoices that when we book them for the fiscal year, you'll have an updated number. I think that will also close the gap. Those are probably two of the more significant impacts. And, you know, there's been a few items that are deferred. Getting back to Director Crane's question, all the work that was forecast for the current fiscal year, we're basically on track and on task with that work. So I think it's just largely a byproduct of, you know, just better budget management and you know, a much tighter look at necessary meetings and things like that. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I'll look to my colleagues for comments and questions. Director Crane.
A comment. I want to thank your shop for the work that you've done for us in the past, and your willingness to keep an eye on us going forward. I think that's a benefit for us. That's then a separate item. The presentation speaking of a 43% increase, and then parenthetically pointing out that that's because of a grant. For me, seeing there's the basic operation, the turn the crank to keep the thing alive. And I think it's important to look at that number separately year over year over year, and then think of these tasks that are above and beyond that in that context of being over and beyond that. So they are, instead of just being lumped into the budget on the front end, they appear as additional elements of the budget for a total. I think that makes it clear to the people looking at it what is expected to be accomplished that's over and above just turning the crank to keep it alive. Thank you.
Yeah, that's I think if you just looked at this budget in a vacuum, it'd be like a little bit of sticker shock. What happened? Because, you know, the assessments last year were in round numbers about $600,000, and now you're looking at well over $1 million. And so again, the basic keep the lights on budget effectively had a modest increase. the largest swing in these budget numbers was, the booking of revenue that will come from, well, let's start with the expense. The expenses associated with the interconnected surface water and groundwater dependent ecosystem and the corresponding revenue. So, that's an important nuance to this budget that I think may get overlooked to the untrained eye.
Director Bailey.
So right now, it's looking like there's still $350,000 of expenses that are due to hit between 4/30 and the end of the year. You spoke of outstanding invoices. Is that a correct amount?
Is what the correct amount?
That we still have about $350,000 to spend in the last 2 months of the fiscal year?
I would say there's available budget of that much, Director Bailey. I do not think we're going to spend that. I do not. I don't see expenses coming in that high. So we could probably kind of back into it based on a forecasted. Well, those are actuals through April, though. So.
The reason I'm asking is because I see that even with this budget here, if we spent all of that money, we'd still have $177,000 left at the end of the year. And the projection from the 24-25 adopted budget is $91,000. So it seems like even if I'm reading these numbers right, if we have the fund balance of $177,000 up there, but we're saying we have a year-end reserve of $91,000, and we're going to be spending less than the total expenses in there, that seems like a significantly larger end fund reserve. So I'm just thinking, we're talking about raising the rates to bring in more revenue, that because we were planning on having a fund year-end reserve of $91,000, but if that's $250,000, $300,000, depending on the spend, that's a significantly larger reserve going into this next year. And I don't know how that affects how much we need to actually raise the rates, because these are new rates that people are kind of still just incorporating into their business operations. And I just want to make sure we're not like excessively raising the rates too quickly when we actually have more reserves than we thought we would.
Yeah, good point. And so all I can say is that during the budget process, we did forecast through year end, and at least the budget committee, those estimates would result in but that's just through April, so budget. Yeah, I would have to look at some other worksheets, Blake, to kind of properly answer that. There's not enough granularity on this summary right here to
Yeah, I think to the general question, there are some expenses that will come in the next 3 weeks that have not necessarily been deferred, but they're outstanding, and that will make up some of the gap that you're seeing here. Whether it will match exactly what we've projected at the beginning of the year for our revenues, that ideally we would actually exceed that goal. The goal, again, is to, from a management perspective, is to increase our reserves so that we have that sort of rainy day fund, but not to a degree where we're increasing rates, and this is not a revenue generating enterprise. So I think, to your concern, I think we can certainly follow up at year's end with, and at the next GSA board meeting in August with those end of year actuals, and then that might help shine a light as to where we are from a fiscal standpoint.
Right, and so then we're making the decision on what the rates are and authorizing the rate increases now based on numbers from 4/30 with all of these significant outstanding unknowns. So, two other quick questions. Can you go back 2 slides? So in there you have the county admin as 5,200. It's the top line, and you're proposing 5,500 for next year. but the actuals already came in at 20,000 for this year, and I just don't see that reflected, that, you know, tripling or almost quadrupling the cost reflected in the new budget. And so I understand you guys are just taking on the admin here and wanting to make sure you've got enough reserves to cover those kind of things. But that was one that just stuck out to me as, you know, that came in much higher, but it's not reflected in the budgeting going forward. So again, there's, I'm sure, factors in the background, but that was one thing that caught my eye. Is that anticipated?
Yeah, there's an easy explanation for that, Director Bailey. I'm sorry for jumping in. There was the County of Mendocino had not billed, I believe, for 2 prior fiscal years, and it was just an oversight on I guess on their part. And so when they realized it, there was obviously we were sitting on revenue that had never been expensed by that cost. So that's in addition to the current year. There was 3 prior years that were layered into that. Does that make sense? So it is kind of an anomaly.
That does make sense. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And one other question. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Later on in here, we're going to be asked to authorize extending contracts for different entities. There is one for West Yost that's for $30,000 for the, looks like, first 6 months of this fiscal year. But I didn't see, you know, on a lot of these, you're really good about annotating what organization that budget's going towards. But I didn't see WY in those. So where is that budget fitting in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and there's also a fairly easy answer. So in terms of the relationship moving forward, I think you can think of West Yost as being essentially as a subcontractor to the city of Ukiah or a supporting entity. So we've carved out some wiggle room in the next fiscal year budget for West Yost to provide support on behalf of the city of Ukiah to the GSA. So for example, preparing this budget, we had support from West Yost. I think from the GSA perspective, that could, you know, that work could be led by the city of Ukiah or the city of Ukiah with support from West Yost. So in terms of where that would come out of, you would look at, for example, feed program administration, which is listed for the city of Ukiah, but would likely have some support from West Yost. Contracts, fiscal management, GSP implementation oversight. So we're not necessarily projecting that we'll spend $30K, but we wanted to provide that avenue so that we can continue a smooth transition with support from West Yost, particularly because they have the experience and they've been doing such a phenomenal job. We wanted to retain them through the calendar year so that we could ensure that the transition goes well.
Great, and so that explains why their budget is zeroed out on this slide from 15,000 this last year to 0, because you're layering it into the city of Ukiah expenses.
Yes, yes, sir.
Director Crane.
2 things. One, each line item, budget line item, by the end of the year needs to be closed to know whether everything that was set out to be done for that budget amount got done or not. And as a piece of that is being sure that all of the costs for that have been accounted for in the appropriate period of time. So keeping those things in sync is pretty important. And the other was, in the discussions quite a while back about funding and reserves, it's my recollection that the group determined that building a bit of reserves year over year for a while to give the agency some ability to deal with downturns should they occur, or demands that we hadn't anticipated that we had to deal with. Building those reserves somewhat was an appropriate thing to do. Thank you.
I also had some concerns over the GSA fee revenue, kind of in line with Director Bailey's comments. and really the appropriateness of raising our fees. There was discussion before I was on the GSA over how that process would work year after year. And so I'm curious if the ad hoc had an opinion in the budget development about increasing the fee revenue and what was discussed.
With the way that it's structured, we can only raise it a maximum of 4%, which then is looking at, and part of it is just to make sure that we have enough cash flow to pay the bills. And part of it, because in moving from the structure of the different agencies paying to taxpayers and paying municipalities, it was just building enough reserve to make sure that we can keep the doors open and lights. And
so the ad hoc felt comfortable with the increase?
Yeah, and part of it's with the grant as well, just because we have to put out money before we get reimbursed. I mean, it's kind of, in another year or two, it should be down because, we're going to be having our sustainability plan evaluated by the state. I anticipate them saying, like, good, we've done the required interconnected groundwater study, and after that, unless the state says you have to do X, Y, and Z in addition to what you've done, then we can go back to the monitoring, which is, like, if you take out the PMAs and their administration, our budget then would be $300,000 a year.
Pretty lean.
Which that's the goal, what we're hoping.
Yeah.
And just to add, the increasing the fees allow us to ensure that our reserves remain where we want them to be, because the cost to administer the fees will also go up. So that is the idea, is that we're adjusting these fees at the current rate of inflation, so that the reserves can go where we want them to be, because costs to administer are expected to go up as well.
And does the GSA have an official reserve policy at this point in time?
Not to my knowledge. I might ask our colleagues from West Yost to comment.
I think I'm drawing a blank on this one.
I comment a little bit on it. I mean, with Harry and I's initial discussions, like over a year ago, we felt somewhere between minimum 3 months. 6 months is better. It's just standard for any kind of agency or organization to have that much to make sure that you can pay your bills.
It would be my desire to see that formalized and approved by the board. Their agreement?
I've been a fan of at least a 25% reserve going forward, but going closer to the 50% has some charm if there's much gray area about what may need to be done in the next couple of years. And it's a lot easier to carry a little bit of safety than it is to, when you get in a hole, dig yourself out.
Director Bailey?
I could see once we finalize what the actual spend was from 24-25, that we move into looking at whether it's a 25 or a 50% annual spend, that's the reserve policy, because it being a new agency and getting up and going, being more conservative and having 50% buffer could make sense while we grapple with what are the ongoing costs and what's that safety buffer needed. But it'd be really good to have this first year's budget in hand, and then maybe look at revising that policy downward to 25% once we have that track record of knowing what's going to be hitting the books.
Alrighty, any further comments or questions?
I just had a quick comment. One thing to be mindful of is the GSA's cash flow, because the nature of, on the revenue side, the fee collection does not come, on an even basis month by month, and so having a little bit of reserves protects the GSA from going into, being able to pay the bills. And we had that issue during the last fiscal year, where we had to get cooperation with the city of Ukiah to pay its fees early so that we wouldn't go into the negative. So it does help you from a cash flow standpoint.
Thank you. All right, we will look for public comment at this time.
Yes. Sean White, City of Ukiah. I just wanted to reiterate what Harry said. The city literally had to pay early so the GSA could pay its bills. I don't think we're in any sort of situation where we have an abundance of reserves at this point. And also, in my opinion, this agency is very young. We don't really have enough data points to trend really anything yet. And inside that limited number of data points, we've already changed how we're doing things. So what we were doing, we don't even know how that's going to work out yet. So I would just caution you to stay conservative, and if we get to some level of charming reserve, as Director Crane referred to it, it's very easy to roll back, but I will tell you, having been in agencies where you're in the hole, it is very difficult and unpleasant to dig yourself out. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk, is there any public comment online?
None online.
Ready. I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the recommended action.
I'll second.
Ready for a roll call?
Director Gasca?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. Alrighty. Moving to item 4B, consideration of a resolution adopting regulatory fee changes for fiscal year 25-26. And again, turn to staff.
Thank you. So again, as we were just discussing, the one major change I think for this fiscal year budget coming forward is an increase in fees. So a resolution must be adopted to satisfy the county's requirement to place the adjusted fees on the tax roll. And so therefore, that's why we're bringing this resolution forward. What the resolution will establish is an increase of 2.24%. So again, that we can increase fees up to 4%, choosing to do that based on the CPI or the CPIU. That's the current rate of inflation. And we've outlined what those fees will actually look like if this resolution is approved, and those are outlined in the staff packet. But this is just an administrative requirement for us to proceed. So happy to answer any questions or concerns.
I see we have a hand up from GSA Legal Counsel.
Hi, Chair. Hi, Directors. I did want to add one little point here, just to be abundantly clear that the GSA, by this board action and this fee resolution, we're not changing the GSA's 2024 fee. We're not adopting a new rate and fee structure. We're only implementing the fee that was established in 2024 by the GSA's rate and fee consultants. That fee study baked in to the GSA's fee structure and including what the fee would be. It presumed a 4% increase, but also allowed for a lower amount consistent with the consumer price index, which that's what the GSA has decided here. I just wanted to be clear that we are not adopting a new fee structure. We're not changing the methodology for calculating fees. We're only implementing the GSA's fees as already adopted. I wanted to just make that clear. So there's no additional notice procedures required. There's no additional public hearing procedures required. So I just want to be careful when we say that we're increasing the fee. We're still working off of the base fee that was adopted in 2024, only implementing the 4% increase, or sorry, in this case, 2.4%, that was presumed when we set that fee in 2024. That was all.
Thank you. Do we have questions or comments from the board? All right, I look for a motion. Or actually, can I call for public comment really quick? Sorry. Can we have any public comment?
None online and none in the chamber.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt the recommended action.
I'll second.
Director Gaska?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. Okay, moving on to item 5, the consent calendar, which is the approval of our minutes for April 10th. Do we have any questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Director Gaska?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. All right, and moving to item 6, staff and partner updates. We'll start with the general manager for 6A.
Thank you. I'm just realizing we do have. It was my understanding we do have an item 5B on the consent calendar as well, to authorize the general manager to execute amendments to existing vendor agreements. I believe that was on the note. I believe it was on the notice, but perhaps not in the packet.
I apologize. I don't think it made it to the prompt, so, but it is on the agenda.
It is, it is.
Okay.
Yes. Does the motioner agree and the second agree?
I agree.
With 5B,
That we just accept the consent calendar, 5A and 5B.
Mm-hmm.
I
not, we
meant
can-
to accept 5A because I had some questions about 5B.
Okay,
Okay, we'll
Sorry.
keep it as is.
that's okay. We will move to 5B. Are there comments or questions on consent calendar 5B?
Yeah, in the staff report, it says extending the term through June 2025, but it seems like in the actual documents, it's through 2026. So I wanted to make sure that we're approving these contracts through June of 2026.
Yes, so to clarify, I think there's just some maybe different interpretation. So we're looking to extend that through June 2025 into the next fiscal year, but not all agreements will actually carry into June of 2026. So although this is extending them through this current fiscal year into next, but they will have somewhat different expiration dates. I would say, so in particular, I would say for West Yost, we're looking at a 6-month extension, which could be further amended if we get down the road and we want to bring that on. In other cases, there'll likely be a full year extension.
So, right, but then if I look at the West Yost draft scope budget, it says a period of 6 months, July 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2026, which is an 18-month period.
That is an error, and thank you for pointing that out. The intention is to for that to be December 31st, 2025, to the end of this current calendar year. Apologies for that.
So I guess what maybe I'm just confused, but it seems like these agreements are extending into the 25-26 fiscal year in differing periods. Some of them are for the full fiscal year, some for 6 months. But the staff report is saying extending the term through June 2025. So isn't it really extending it to various points within the 25-26 year?
That is correct, yes, yes. And apologies for any confusion with that language. I think the idea here again is to ensure that we can continue operating, and 4 such agreements are set to expire this month. So the goal here is just to have that continuation of services into the next fiscal year. And
Directors, I need to interject here. I'm sorry. I think just with regard to the Brown Act, we are talking about the consent calendar here. The consent calendar needs to be approved as a package deal. If a board member wants to ask for one of those items to be removed from the consent calendar, and then we can vote on the consent calendar with what's left, which would only be item 5A, we can then return to this action later in the meeting, but we shouldn't be discussing it right now under the consent calendar.
I think there was an interest in pulling 5B from our board.
Did we vote on the consent calendar yet?
We voted on 5A.
Okay, so I think we should do that again, just as a matter of formality here. We should pull item 5B at the request of the director, and we should vote on the consent calendar as it stands without item 5B, which would thereby be you'd be voting on 5A in that case. But we can't vote on 5A as a separate item.
Thanks for the clarification. I would like to pull item 5B off the consent calendar so we can discuss.
I'll second that.
All right, no second needed. I believe that we can just move to a specific roll call vote for our consent calendar, and we'll take 5B up later in the meeting.
Director Gaska?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
And Chair Klein?
Aye. Thank you to council for clarification. Are we allowed to take up 5B at this point, or do we need to wait until after staff report?
Do we have a miscellaneous matters on the agenda? It doesn't look like a future agenda item, staff and partner updates. We can take up item 5B. It would need to be presented again, not as a consent item. Let me see really quick if I happen to have a. I don't see any issues doing it now. Just again, making it clear that this is an item on the agenda. We are not discussing it now as a consent item. And maybe we should have a motion to bring this item up.
I'll make a motion to discuss and make a decision on item 5B.
Second.
Director Gaska?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. All right, we will move to item 5B for discussion and possible action. Authorizing the general manager in collaboration with legal counsel and GSA board to execute amendments to existing vendor agreements. Look to comments and questions from the board. I'm going to look to Director Bailey and ask if he has an amendment for the dates on item 5B. How would you like that referenced in the item?
I think if, in the subject and then in the summary, it's stating that, agreements are extending in the summary subject, it says extending the term through June 2025. It seems more appropriate to say into the fiscal year 25-26. And then there are some items that we're approving within this which have differing terms of scope. Because some are extending through the full fiscal year 25-26, most of them, and then the West Yost one is extending through December 31st, 2025, not 2026. Yes. Would that make sense to everybody else on the board of we're changing it to?
Yes. Would you like to make that motion?
Sure. I move to change the there's so many different points in here, that we would be authorizing the extension of the terms of the agreements listed below, CLSI, MCRCD, West Yost, and LWA into the 25-26 fiscal year.
I'll second that.
All right, do we have any public comment?
No public comment online or in the chamber.
Thank you. I'd look for a roll call.
Director Gaska?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. All right. Thanks, everyone, for getting through that. We'll now turn to item 6, staff and partner updates, starting with our general manager.
Thank you. Yeah, there's outside of the work to put the budget and these contract extensions together, which I think we've discussed, there's just really 2 short, brief updates that I'd like to provide some background to. So first is the last board meeting, the board authorized staff to enter into vendor selection and negotiation for the CDFW grant. As I mentioned, we received 1 loan bid, and so it was a non-competitive process. So the board authorized us to go into discussion and to discuss scope and budget. And as an attachment for this item is the agreed to, not fully executed agreement, not a draft agreement, but the agreed to scope and budget for that work. So we have been making progress on that front. And the next step would be, since we're already authorized to do so, would be to work with the GSA board chair and legal counsel to actually draft and execute that agreement. So I wanted to provide that as a progress report as to where we are with that item. Secondly and lastly, we also have the FSS ad hoc meeting scheduled for June 24th. So I know that there were some questions, concerns about that process for the FSS support from Stantec. And so an ad hoc has stood up within the TAC, and we'll be meeting later this month. And the goal is to get that work going so that we can take full advantage of that at no cost service support from Stantec. So we look forward to kicking off those conversations later this month and into the summer. And that's all I have today. Happy to answer any questions or follow up.
Okay, looking to the board for questions or comments. Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item?
None online, none in the chamber.
Thank you. And we'll now turn 6B, updates from GSA Legal Counsel.
Hello again. Yes, so we have an update particularly that applies to IRWA's withdrawal from the Joint Powers Authority, that is the GSA. We first informed the board about this in January, and at that time we were hoping to receive notice from IRWA of its withdrawal, because according to the Joint Powers Agreement under which the GSA operates, there's a 60-day notice requirement before IRWA's notice becomes, before their withdrawal becomes effective. We first learned about this back in November. Since then, both GSA counsel and staff and the general manager have made repeated attempts to IRWA and its legal counsel to follow up on the status of this request, to stress the importance of this, because without that notice, IRWA is basically locked into the agency as a member, and with other amendments we're seeking to make to the Joint Powers Agreement. We want to do this all in one clean motion, and that 60-day notice has been quite the hang up. We received an email from IRWA's counsel this week containing copies of digital copies of the notices that were that he claimed to have been sent on May 7. We did not receive confirmation when these notices were sent, and in our discussions with the general manager, that notice was not found. However, we do have the digital copy of it, and according to the date of that notice, the effective date of IRWA's withdrawal will be July 7. So as of July 7, IRWA will no longer have legal authority to continue engaging in the GSA's operations. It will leave its seat vacant on the board, which brings the most important implication of this, which is that the GSA is now down, without IRWA, will be down one of its member positions on the board, and there are 4 of them. We've also become aware through the general manager that the tribal stakeholder director for the GSA has been particularly non-responsive. I've heard from Holly Roberson, who took on the GSA's legal work from Scott Morris, that he has not been involved since Holly began her role as general manager for the GSA. So that effectively means that the GSA right now is down to 4 board members as of July 7 that it can rely on to attend meetings, and that's the minimum for a quorum. So we have other plans to address this. For example, the Ukiah Valley Water Authority has expressed its intention to enter the GSA as a member. There haven't been any indications that that is still not the plan. That could happen but theoretically ahead of the next board meeting, but those details are still being worked out. That would fill at least another board seat, and we continue to work with the general manager here regarding the next steps and the most efficient way of handling that tribal stakeholder director, and whether that be potentially requesting his resignation or initiating steps for removal. We'll have to consider that later on. We haven't engaged with this member or with this director, so there's still more information that we need there. But I just wanted to flag that there are some. The board is vulnerable right now with its board composition as of July 7, and it'll be important for, as of the August meeting, if we have not filled IRWA's seat, that we communicate properly with all of you that you attend that meeting, that we at least have that quorum as of the July 7 meeting. Now that brings also other JPA amendments, other amendments to the Joint Powers Agreement. We have since January, around the same time we started discussing IRWA's withdrawal, we've also discussed transitioning the roles of treasurer and controller away from the county to either another member agency or potentially a consultant. Those are also details that are still being worked out, and we'll have an update for the board at the August meeting. The GSA does have a contract with the city for administrative services, and depending on how we amend the JPA, we may also need to reevaluate that contract. We want to make sure that whatever member agency or whoever takes over the roles of controller and treasurer are well equipped to do so, and that we don't have any hurdles that make that any more complicated than necessary. So that might require some other amendments to the Joint Powers Agreement. But look forward to additional updates for those roles at the August meeting. And I believe that concludes the bulk of what I wanted to discuss here. Again, after the August meeting, our hope is to have a very clear idea of how we're going to move forward with the amendments to the Joint Powers Agreement, such that after the meeting following the August meeting, we will, if everything goes to plan, have an amended Joint Powers Agreement for the board to review and hopefully approve. That was all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have questions or comments from the board? All right, seeing none, is there any public comment?
No public online or in the chamber.
All right, thank you. Moving now to item 7, future agenda items and setting our next meeting date. We have discussion and consideration of a future agenda items and scheduling of next meeting date, with meeting to be held at the County of Mendocino Board of Supervisors Chamber at 501 Low Gap Road.
Yes, so in addition to setting the next meeting date, what we've previously discussed is bringing forward the meeting schedule for the entire fiscal year. This gives obviously clarity and confidence as to when we'll be meeting. We also have a requirement to meet quarterly, so we've structured the next fiscal year meeting schedule accordingly. The technical advisory committee meetings that are listed there have been since agreed to by the TAC at the last TAC meeting. But we wanted to provide the entire meeting cadence as previously discussed for the board to consider. And just as a reminder, what we've previously talked about were certain reporting deadlines and the need to be able to meet in advance of certain deliverables and reports so that they may be approved by the board before they're submitted to regulatory bodies or to stakeholders. So what you have here is the proposed meeting schedule for the next fiscal year. It doesn't preclude us in a future time to reschedule meetings, but we wanted to just, as opposed to just bringing the next meeting, all of them for the year ahead.
All right, do we have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I was going to request if we could move the time back to where we used to meet at 1, and we'd moved it to 10 to accommodate Tracy McNerlin, who's no longer on the board. It's just I have a conflict on those days, so if we could go back to 1 would work better for me.
So changing from 10 a.m. to noon, from 1 to 3 p.m. on those dates. Okay.
I don't have the normal Director Watts schedule, so I'll just volunteer that that's okay with him.
Are we sure of availability of the board chambers for the afternoon on these days?
Just coming to light of that request, we haven't had previous conversations, but again, I think there's nothing that could preclude us, even if you guys today do approve of the schedule, for us to change that at will. So I think what we'll do, we have discussed on a general sense of these meeting dates in relationship with the TAC, but that's presented today for consideration.
All right, looking for a motion.
I'm so moved for the 1 p.m. start time on the dates that are listed here.
I'll second that.
There's August 14th, November 13th, March 12th.
Thursday.
Same day of the week. Yes, Thursday.
Yeah, not changing.
It'd be 1 to 3 p.m. on those Thursdays.
Yes.
Pending confirmation of availability of the chambers.
All right, any public comment?
None online, none in the chamber.
Looking for a roll call vote?
Director Gasca?
Aye.
Director Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane? Chair Klein?
Aye. All righty, I think that takes us to the end of our agenda, and we will adjourn at 11:04 a.m.
Recording stopped.